Not that many great centers. And I'd be Michael Jordan in this era.
Patrick Ewing was once the living heartbeat of New York basketball. The man who turned Madison Square Garden into something closer to a cathedral than an arena. A place where belief mattered as much as talent. Night after night, he carried the hopes of a demanding city that never stops asking for greatness. He was not simply a center anchoring a team, he was the symbol of perseverance, pride, and resilience. From the moment he arrived, fans didn't just watch him play, they leaned on him emotionally. For nearly 2 decades, through triumphs and heartbreaks, Ewing stood tall as the face of the Knicks, embodying everything New York wanted to believe about itself. Tough, loyal, proud, and unyielding. Roots in Jamaica, a childhood forged by loss. Patrick Ewing's story did not begin with cheers or trophies, but in a modest Jamaican home, shaped by hardship and early loss. His father died when Patrick was still very young, leaving his mother to carry the full weight of raising a family alone. She worked tirelessly, often multiple jobs, teaching Patrick resilience before he ever knew the word. Even as a child, his extraordinary size made him stand out, not always in kind ways. He often felt isolated, different, unsure of where he belonged. But those early years quietly planted the discipline, humility, and inner strength that would later define him far more than any stat line ever could. America. A promise that came with pain. When Patrick moved to the United States at age 12, he believed he was stepping into opportunity, but adjustment came with loneliness and cultural shock. His accent, background, and appearance made him feel like an outsider at a time when fitting in felt essential. School was difficult, friendships were rare, and silence became his shield. He rarely shared his pain with his mother, choosing instead to absorb it quietly. It was during this period that he learned endurance, not the kind celebrated in sports, but the quiet endurance of surviving day after day without reassurance that things would get easier. Basketball. The first place. He belonged. Everything changed for Patrick Ewing the first time he stepped onto a basketball court. In a world that often judged him for his accent, his background, and the circumstances of his youth, the game demanded nothing but effort, focus, and heart. On the court, his size, which elsewhere had sometimes made him awkward or conspicuous, became a natural advantage. Every jump, every pivot, every blocked shot carried immediate feedback, teaching him that success was earned, not given. The rhythm of dribbling, the echo of sneakers across the hardwood, and the simple, unspoken truth that improvement came from repetition gave him something he had rarely known before: belonging. Here, no one questioned his worth beyond what he brought to the game. Basketball didn't erase the struggles that shadowed his childhood, but it offered a release, a structured way to channel frustration and ambition into something tangible. For the first time, Patrick could imagine a future not dictated by survival or circumstance, but by the possibilities of his own effort, skill, and determination. Georgetown and John Thompson, a father figure. At Georgetown University, Patrick encountered John Thompson, a man whose influence would shape every aspect of his life. Thompson was more than a coach. He was a protector, mentor, and father figure. He saw past Patrick's physical gifts, understanding the emotional wounds that had traveled with him from Jamaica to New York. Under Thompson's guidance, Ewing learned lessons that no practice or playbook could teach. He learned leadership not just through calls on the court, but through the example of discipline, honesty, and self-respect. Accountability was a principle instilled early, and self-worth became something rooted in effort and integrity rather than applause or approval. Georgetown was more than a basketball program. It became a sanctuary, a place where Patrick's identity could grow alongside his skills. Under Thompson's watch, he understood that greatness was not just about the scoreboard. It was about character, resilience, and the quiet strength to shoulder responsibility for those around you. Pain before glory. The 1982 final, Patrick's first taste of national heartbreak, came in the 1982 NCAA Championship, a game forever remembered for Michael Jordan's rise, but a night Patrick Ewing would never forget for the lessons it demanded. Georgetown fell short against North Carolina, and the weight of the loss landed squarely on Patrick's shoulders. He internalized the disappointment, feeling as though he had failed not only his teammates and coach, but also the community that had invested so much hope in him. That night was an introduction to a recurring truth of his life. Greatness is rarely free from emotional burden. Every triumph carries expectations, and every setback carries reflection that lingers far longer than applause. Patrick carried the sting of that game as motivation, understanding early that elite performance comes with responsibility that cannot be shrugged off, and that the measure of a player is often defined more by how they respond to failure than to victory. Redemption and pressure. The 1984 title. 2 years later, Georgetown's victory in the 1984 NCAA Championship represented both redemption and the heavy shadow of expectation. Standing at the top of college basketball, Patrick Ewing was celebrated as a hero, yet triumph brought its own anxiety. Winning the title did not free him from pressure. If anything, it intensified it. He carried the fear of letting down those who had believed in him, the coach who had nurtured him, teammates who trusted him implicitly, and fans who had projected their hopes onto him. The championship crown elevated him into a symbolic figure, a living emblem of excellence, but symbols are rarely allowed to be human. Behind the jubilation was the quiet determination not to betray faith, to continue proving himself worthy of trust, and to embrace the responsibilities that accompanied visibility. The 1984 title was a victory, but it was also a lesson. Even at the pinnacle, the work was never finished, and expectations were never fully satisfied. New York calls. The savior arrives. The 1985 NBA draft sent Patrick Ewing to New York City, a metropolis desperate for revival, identity, and hope. From the moment he arrived, Patrick was not just a rookie. He was a franchise, a solution, the embodiment of a city's aspirations. Headlines hailed him as the future, and the arena he entered became both a stage and a crucible. The excitement of arrival was matched by the weight of expectation. In New York, admiration has conditions. It is bound to results, and love is often tied directly to performance. Patrick quickly learned that the adulation that accompanied him could vanish in a single loss, and that the scrutiny of media and fans was unrelenting. He embraced the challenge, committing himself fully to the responsibility thrust upon him. But he also understood something fundamental. In New York, greatness is never assumed. It must be proven repeatedly, and the measure of a player is often not what they achieve, but how they endure the pressure that achievement demands. Injuries and doubt. The cost of expectation. Patrick Ewing's early years in the NBA were marked not only by promise, but by physical setbacks that slowed his momentum and invited relentless scrutiny. Injuries to his knees and lower body interrupted what many expected to be a seamless rise, and the same voices that once celebrated his arrival began to question whether his body could endure the league's demands. Doubt became a constant presence in headlines and talk shows, but Patrick refused to let it seep into his preparation. He played through discomfort, exhaustion, and criticism, believing that effort was the only thing fully within his control. At night, alone with ice packs wrapped around swollen joints, replaying harsh commentary in his mind, he learned that leadership is often quiet and lonely, and that resilience sometimes means carrying pain without explanation or applause. Madison Square Garden wars. Throughout the late 1980s and 1990s, Patrick Ewing stood at the center of some of the most intense rivalries the NBA has ever known. Battles against Chicago, Indiana, Miami, and Houston were not merely games. They were physical and emotional wars that shaped an era of basketball defined by toughness and pride. Night after night, Ewing anchored elite defenses, absorbed double teams, and carried offensive responsibility with no guarantee of relief. Madison Square Garden became a stage where effort mattered as much as outcome, and Patrick embodied the spirit of a city that admired grit more than glamour. These games reflected New York itself, hard, relentless, and unwilling to back down, and Patrick became the human representation of that identity. 1994. One game from everything. The 1994 NBA Finals brought Patrick Ewing closer to a championship than he had ever been. Game 7 against Houston was tense and unforgiving, a slow grind where every possession felt like a verdict. Patrick battled inside, defended relentlessly, and fought to keep hope alive until the final seconds. When the buzzer sounded and the Knicks fell short, disappointment washed over the city like a heavy silence. Although basketball is a team effort, Patrick became the focal point of criticism, unfairly bearing the weight of collective failure. The label of not enough followed him, overshadowing the years of sacrifice, leadership, and endurance it took to carry a franchise to that moment. 1995 and 1999. Missed moments in 1995, another playoff heartbreak arrived in a moment that history simplified far too easily. A late-game play against Hakeem Olajuwon became a symbol critics used to question Patrick's greatness, ignoring the context of years spent battling elite opponents with no margin for error. In 1999, after leading an improbable finals run as an 8th seed, fate delivered its cruelest twist. A torn Achilles tendon sidelined Patrick before the championship series began, forcing him to watch from the bench as the Knicks fought without him. He had guided them there, believed in them when few others did, yet could not finish the journey on the court. That helplessness lingered far longer than the final score. The ring that never came over. Time, the absence of a championship ring, became the lens through which critics evaluated Patrick Ewing's entire career. For many observers, it became a convenient conclusion, a way to simplify a complex legacy into a single missing piece. But for Patrick, the ring symbolized far more than victory. It represented his mother's sacrifice, his coach's faith, and his own lifelong refusal to quit. Not winning it did not erase his greatness or his impact, but it left a quiet ache that never fully disappeared, a reminder that effort and outcome do not always align, even for those who give everything. The body keeps score. Years of elite competition left Patrick Ewing's body permanently altered. Chronic knee pain, damaged feet, and lingering injuries followed him into retirement, turning everyday movement into a reminder of battles long finished. Pain became something to manage rather than overcome, a constant presence woven into daily life. Yet Patrick never spoke publicly about suffering. He believed endurance was part of the responsibility he accepted when he chose greatness. Even as his body resisted him, his spirit remained firm, rooted in the belief that complaining would dishonor the work he had done and the people who had believed in him. A quiet betrayal. The trade. In 2000, after 15 seasons with the New York Knicks, Patrick Ewing was traded with little warning and minimal ceremony. There was no farewell worthy of his contribution, no moment for reflection or gratitude. For a man who had given his youth, health, and identity to one franchise, the silence was deeply painful. The trade felt less like a basketball decision and more like an abrupt erasure. Patrick accepted it professionally, but the emotional impact lingered. It was not the move itself that hurt most. It was the feeling that loyalty, once given completely, had not been returned in kind. Family sacrifices. Away from the court, Patrick faced personal losses that success could not shield him from. His marriage ended, and with time came reflection on the moments basketball had taken. Family dinners missed, childhood memories never formed, time that could not be reclaimed. Watching his son pursue a basketball career under the weight of a famous name brought mixed emotions. Patrick saw the pressure, the disappointment, and the unspoken expectations mirrored in his child's journey. It was a reminder that legacy can inspire, but it can also burden, and that not every cost of greatness is visible from the outside. Coaching and invisibility. After his playing career ended, Patrick spent more than 15 years as an NBA assistant coach, respected for his knowledge, discipline, and professionalism. He arrived early, stayed late, and poured his experience into developing younger players. Despite multiple interviews for head coaching positions, opportunities never materialized. Less accomplished candidates moved ahead, while Patrick remained in supporting roles. He never complained publicly, choosing patience and dignity instead. Yet the silence surrounding his contributions became its own form of disappointment, a quiet realization that recognition is not always granted in proportion to effort. Returning home. Georgetown. In 2017, Georgetown welcomed Patrick Ewing back as head coach, and the moment felt like destiny fulfilled. It was a return to the place that shaped him, guided him, and once gave him refuge. Early optimism filled the program, but the realities of modern college basketball proved unforgiving. Losses accumulated, scrutiny intensified, and patience wore thin. Eventually, Georgetown chose to move in a different direction, leaving Patrick once again walking away quietly from a place he loved deeply. The disappointment cut deeply, not because of ego, but because it felt like another home slipping away. COVID and mortality. In 2020, Patrick Ewing was hospitalized with COVID-19, facing a battle unlike any he had known. Isolated and vulnerable, stripped of strength and routine, he confronted mortality in a way basketball never prepared him for. The experience was frightening and humbling, a reminder that even the strongest bodies are temporary. He survived, but the encounter left a permanent emotional mark, reshaping his understanding of time, health, and what truly matters when everything else falls away. Losing John Thompson. Later that same year, Patrick lost John Thompson, the man who had been his coach, mentor, and father figure. Thompson's death was devastating, reopening old wounds and leaving an emptiness nothing could fill. He was the one who believed in Patrick when the world was hostile, who protected him, challenged him, and taught him what it meant to be more than an athlete. Losing Thompson felt like losing the foundation upon which his life had been built, a grief that words could never fully capture. Aging, health, and silence. As Patrick entered his 60s, health challenges became more pronounced. Diabetes, chronic pain, and vision issues reshaped daily routines and forced a slower pace. The spotlight faded, replaced by quieter days and long stretches of reflection. Recognition became rare, but memory grew stronger. Without the noise of expectation, Patrick confronted aging honestly, learning to live with limitations while holding on to gratitude for what his body once allowed him to do. Peace after pressure. In the absence of constant demands, Patrick discovered something unexpected: peace. Walks near the water, unhurried conversations with family, and moments of stillness replaced the relentless pressure that once defined his life. He learned that worth does not vanish when applause fades, and that identity can exist beyond performance. For the first time, he was free to be present rather than prepared. A legacy beyond rings. Patrick Ewing's legacy cannot be measured by championships alone. It lives in resilience, dignity, and the courage to endure disappointment without bitterness. He showed a generation that greatness includes loss, that leadership often means standing firm when outcomes disappoint, and that perseverance is a form of victory even when banners are never raised. Final truth: Patrick Ewing's life reminds us that heroes are human, that failure does not erase value, and that love outlasts glory. His journey is not defined by what he lacked, but by what he gave: effort, loyalty, and integrity, and that legacy, rooted in character rather than trophies, is one no ring could ever surpass.